Guten Tag alle, Herr Wallace hier. Heute werden wir ein bisschen über Konjunktiv I und II sprechen. So today we were going to talk about the subjunctive in German, and the first thing you need to know is that there are two types of the subjunctive in German. There's the subjunctive I or the subjunctive II, which in German referred to as Konjunktiv I or Konjunktiv II. So that's the first thing. Just like we talked about with the passive voice, the subjunctive is a mood and not a tense. So the subjunctive can be expressed in different tenses, but it's a mood. And it's used to express doubt, uncertainty, or hypothetical statements. And this is in contrast with the indicative mood, which is what we use to express facts. So here we have the Konjunktiv I or subjunctive I and the Konjunktiv II or subjunctive II. The subjunctive I is the form most commonly used in indirect speech, and it's what we're going to talk about in this video today. In other words, it's reporting what someone else has said, so you will see this form mostly in written German, in newspapers, articles, but mostly written. The subjunctive II, however, is the form that Germans use most when talking about hypothetical situations or to express doubt or uncertainty about things. So it's used far more than subjunctive I in speaking. Okay, so that's the big major differences. Now let's talk about the subjunctive I and how to form it. The subjunctive I is the equivalent of a quote and is used to indicate that the author of an article or story is reporting what someone else said. It's a formal style used mostly in writing. So for example, I can say, der Mann sagt, müsse jeden Tag in der Woche arbeiten. This is subjunctive speech. You're reporting the man said he must work a lot in the week or every day in the week. Whereas the present tense is the direct speech. Der Mann sagt, ich muss jeden Tag in der Woche arbeiten. Okay, so in reported speech there are three participants: the author, the reader, and the third person. So the author is the reporter, and he's reporting to the reader about something that the third person said or did. So when the author speaks of information known to him, he uses the indicative. But when the author reports to the reader what a third person said, the words of the third person are relayed in this subjunctive I form. So like I said, most often you're going to see it in reported speech. So Herr Wallace sagte, ein Leben ist nicht lang genug Deutsch zu lernen. That's a direct quote of what I said. Herr Wallace sagte, ein Leben sei nicht lang genug Deutsch zu lernen. This means that someone is writing that Mr. Wallace said, it was reported that Mr. Wallace said a life is not long enough to learn German. So this is not quoted directly, but rather slightly paraphrased. So let's look at how it's formed in the present tense, and for example, we'll take the verb haben. So hopefully you're familiar with the present tense forms of haben, so you'll easily recognize the differences here. Ich habe, that's the same as the present tense. Du habest, that's very different. In the present tense, it's du hast. Er hat in the present tense, but in the subjunctive I, it's habe again. Wir haben, that's the same as the present tense. Ihr habet, that's the different, and then Sie haben. So the ones I've outlined here in green are similar, or just like the present tense conjugations of this verb. And for this reason, a lot of times the subjunctive I is avoided with these particular, in the first person singular, first person plural, and in the third person plural, because you can see where confusion can happen. Sein is a verb that is the only exception to these endings, so it changes a little bit differently. Ich sei, du seiest, er sei, wir seien, ihr seid, ihr seiet, sie seien. So these are the subjunctive I conjugations of the verb sein. And as I said, subjunctive I is mostly used in indirect speech. Okay, so subjunctive I appears typically in the third person singular only. Forms for the second person singular exist, just as I showed you, but they're rarely used because they are confusing, number one. The plural is often not used except with the verb sein, and the third person singular conjugation of subjunctive I is the stem of the verb plus the ending E. That's the one you most run into. Sie macht becomes sie mache in Subjunctive 1. Sie sagt, sie sache, sie sage. Sie hat, sie habe, und sie wird, sie werde. So when you see this, you automatically know that this is different from the present tense, because the present tense, it ends in a T, so you know that this is reported speech. This is something that they said. Let's look at how it's formed in the future tense here for a moment. Forming the future tense in Subjunctive 1 is as easy as using the conjugations of the verb werden, the Subjunctive 1 conjugations of the verb werden, along with the infinitive of the secondary verb, which is normally placed at the end. So let's take a look at the subjunctive forms of werden. Ich werde, just like we did with haben, we add an E. It's very similar to present. It's the same as the present tense conjugation. Du werdest, werde, wir werden, ihr werdet, sie werden. Okay. So when you say sagt, werde nicht gehen, you know instantly that this is not the present tense. This is not the indicative mood. This is the subjunctive mood, and it's Subjunctive 1. And you know then that it's reported speech, because the present tense is wird nicht gehen. So you know automatically when you see that this is reported speech. And then the secondary verb, just like you do in the present tense when you're using werden, is located at the end of the clause or sentence. Okay, now let's look at it in the past tense. Forming the past tense will involve the Subjunctive 1 forms of either haben or sein, okay, which can be either one of your helping verbs, and the past participle of the secondary verb. So what you have to remember is that in the Subjunctive 1, there's only one form that replaces all three of the past indicative past tense forms. So in the indicative, lernte, hat gelernt, hatte gelernt. These are all replaced in the Subjunctive 1 with the phrase sagt, habe Deutsch gelernt. And this is reported speech saying he said he has learned German. Okay, so it's really replacing three different past tenses. In the indicative mood, you have the simple past or imperfect, lernte. You have the present perfect or perfekt in German, hat gelernt. And you have the Plusquamperfekt or the past perfect, we would say in English, okay? And so not all your verbs are going to use haben as a helping verb. Some will use sein. For example, gehen, it's moving from one place to another, clearly indicates moving from one place to another. So it's going to use sein as a helping verb. So ging, ist gegangen, und war gegangen all become, in the Subjunctive 1, sagt, sei nach Atlanta gegangen. So this is reported speech about he has gone to Atlanta in the past. Okay, so again, we're using the Subjunctive 1 form of sein here, our helping verb, and at the end is the past participle of the secondary verb. Okay, das war's. Vielen Dank für das Zuschauen. Auf Wiedersehen.